So my passion and the work of the Centre for Early Childhood stems from one essential truth: that the love we feel in our earliest years fundamentally shapes who we become and how we thrive as adults. Love is the first and most essential bond.
Catherine's knees buckled. Palace staff gasped in disbelief. This wasn't just a name, it was a message that would shake the monarchy to its core. Nobody saw this coming. The choice was so shocking, so deeply personal, that even senior royals were left stunned into silence. What William and Kate just revealed will change the royal family forever. And when you hear the real reason behind this name, the hidden meaning they've kept secret all these months.
It was a very sweaty process, Vater, over many years. But I think, to start back at the very beginning, I think it came about from a desire to see more change and to highlight wonderful people doing incredible things, as we've all seen.
You'll understand why this moment will be remembered as the day everything changed. The morning of the announcement arrived quietly, as most significant moments in royal history tend to do. Staff members at Windsor Castle moved through the ancient corridors with their usual discretion, though there was something different in the air that day. Those who had worked within the palace walls for years could sense it, the kind of anticipation that precedes major news, the sort that makes even the most experienced professionals check their phones more frequently than usual. Catherine, Princess of Wales, had always been remarkably skilled at maintaining privacy when it mattered most. For months, the world had been consumed with questions and theories. Newspapers devoted entire sections to speculation. Online forums buzzed with endless debates. Royal correspondents filed daily reports analyzing every public appearance, every photograph, searching for clues. Yet through it all, the palace had remained characteristically silent. That wall of discretion, built over generations, held firm. Prince William understood the weight of what they were about to do. Standing in his private study that morning, he found himself thinking about the generations of royals who had faced similar moments. This was not simply about sharing a name with the public. It was about legacy, about continuing a story that stretched back more than 1,000 years. Every decision carried meaning. Every announcement sent ripples far beyond the palace walls. His thoughts turned to his mother, Diana, and how she had handled the intense scrutiny that came with every aspect of royal life. He thought about his father, King Charles, and the expectations that accompanied even the smallest family matters. Most of all, his mind settled on Catherine and their children, the family they had built together despite the enormous pressures that came with their positions. The decision to have a fourth child had surprised many people. After Prince Louis was born in 2018, most observers assumed the Wales family was complete. 3 children seemed like the natural conclusion. George, the future king, already showing signs of the composure he would need for his eventual role. Charlotte, whose confident personality had won hearts during public appearances. Louis, whose animated reactions at royal events had become beloved moments, shared across social media. The family appeared balanced and content. But life rarely follows the plans we make for it, as Catherine often reminded William during their private conversations. The pregnancy announcement had caught nearly everyone off guard, including some members of the extended royal family. Catherine had wanted to wait before going public, to be absolutely certain. She had learned from previous experiences that public attention during pregnancy could become overwhelming. The hyperemesis gravidarum that had affected her earlier pregnancies returned, forcing her to step back from scheduled engagements and spend several weeks away from public view. During those quiet months, the media speculation intensified. Some publications suggested problems that did not exist, creating narratives out of absence and silence. Catherine endured it all, as she had learned to do over the years. She had studied the experiences of those who came before her, learning from both the successes and the mistakes. She had watched how Diana's every move was analyzed and criticized, how the constant attention affected personal well-being and family relationships. She had also observed Queen Elizabeth's unwavering sense of duty, the way the late Queen balanced personal sacrifice with public service throughout her 70-year reign. Catherine took these lessons and created her own approach, one that prioritized her children's welfare while still honoring her responsibilities. The birth itself had been kept remarkably private, which was nearly impossible in the age of instant communication and constant social media updates. Catherine delivered at the Lindo wing, following tradition, but the usual fanfare was deliberately reduced. There were no crowds of photographers camping outside for days beforehand, no announcement when labor began, just a simple statement released afterward, confirming that mother and baby were both healthy. The baby's sex had been revealed in that initial statement, a daughter, their second princess, but the name remained a closely guarded secret, known only to a small circle of family members and trusted advisors. Now, standing in rooms that had witnessed centuries of royal history, William and Catherine prepared to share that name with the world. The communications team had received their briefing. Official statements had been drafted, revised, and revised again. Every word had been carefully considered for how it might be interpreted or misunderstood. This was not just a personal family announcement. It was a statement about the direction of the monarchy, about the values that would guide the next generation, about finding balance between honoring tradition and embracing necessary change. The name they had chosen carried deep significance. It was not a decision made quickly or without careful thought. Weeks of discussion had taken place, not only between William and Catherine, but also with King Charles and other senior family members. Each potential name had been examined for its historical connections, its public perception, its personal meaning to the family. Some names had been immediately ruled out as too controversial or divisive. Others were set aside as too common or too unusual. The name they finally selected represented a bridge between past and present, a way to honor those who came before while looking forward to future generations. It needed to work on multiple levels, carrying historical weight while still feeling appropriate for a child growing up in the 21st century. William had spent considerable time in the royal archives, reviewing family trees and historical documents. He consulted with historians and constitutional experts, seeking their perspectives on various options. Catherine approached the question from a different angle, thinking not just about historical significance, but about practical realities. How would the name sound in everyday situations? Would their daughter face teasing because of it? Could it be shortened to a friendly nickname if she preferred that as she grew older? These parental concerns existed alongside the more formal considerations of royal protocol. They also had to think about international implications. The British monarchy no longer governed a vast empire, but it remained the symbolic head of the Commonwealth, a voluntary association of 56 nations across every continent. The name would be heard and used by billions of people in vastly different cultural contexts. It needed to be pronounceable in multiple languages and culturally appropriate across diverse settings. There were names that Catherine loved but William had concerns about, and vice versa. Family members offered suggestions that were politely acknowledged and quietly set aside. King Charles apparently favored certain traditional options. Queen Camilla advocated for something slightly more contemporary. Prince Harry, despite ongoing family tensions, reportedly sent a private message suggesting a name that held meaning for both brothers. Princess Anne, in her typical fashion, stayed out of the debate, though she apparently told a friend that whatever they chose would inevitably face criticism from someone. The late Queen Elizabeth had set an example for this kind of careful consideration. When naming her own children, she had balanced tradition with personal preference, royal duty with maternal instinct. She understood that names mattered, that they shaped public perception and created expectations that would follow a child throughout life. William and Catherine had studied her choices, learning from both the successful decisions and the occasional missteps that even the most experienced royals could make. As the appointed hour approached, everything was ready. The statement was prepared. The protocols were in place. Soon the world would know the name that William and Catherine had chosen for their daughter, a name that would become part of royal history and spark countless conversations about what it meant for the future of the monarchy. Understanding the significance of any royal name requires first understanding the weight that names carry within the Windsor family. Every name serves as a message, a declaration of values and priorities, sometimes a subtle political statement, other times a more obvious one. When Elizabeth Alexandra Mary was born in 1926, nobody could have predicted she would become the longest reigning monarch in British history. Her names connected her to previous queens and established her place within a lineage stretching back centuries. When Charles Philip Arthur George was christened, Each name carried the weight of royal ancestors and the hopes of a nation recovering from war. The tradition of royal naming has evolved over centuries, shaped by politics, religion, family loyalty, and public opinion. In earlier times, names were chosen primarily to honor previous monarchs or to cement political alliances between royal houses: Mary and Elizabeth, James and Charles. These names appeared repeatedly throughout the family tree like a musical refrain, connecting each generation to those that came before. The 20th century brought changes to this tradition, as it brought changes to every aspect of royal life. Diana had broken conventions with her sons' names in ways both subtle and significant. William Arthur Philip Louis represented a departure from the heavy Germanic names that had dominated the family for generations. Choosing William as the first name, rather than relegating it to a middle position, signaled a return to English roots and a conscious distancing from the family's German heritage. When Harry was born, christened Henry Charles Albert David, the casual use of Harry rather than the formal Henry suggested a desire for their sons to have some sense of normality, even within the unique constraints of royal life. Catherine and William continued this evolution with their own children's names. George Alexander Louis honored the king's formal title while including Alexander, a name with no direct royal precedent in recent British history. The choice made headlines and sparked discussions about whether the couple was introducing a new era of naming conventions. Charlotte Elizabeth Diana generated even more attention worldwide for its inclusion of Diana, the first official acknowledgement of William's mother in a royal child's name since her death. The middle name Elizabeth paid tribute to the late Queen, while Charlotte itself connected back to George IV's daughter. Louis Arthur Charles completed the set, honoring Prince Philip's uncle Louis Mountbatten while including Arthur, a name beloved by the British for its legendary associations. Each of these naming decisions had been analysed extensively by experts and casual observers alike. Royal historians wrote lengthy articles examining the significance of each choice. Bookmakers took bets on potential names before each birth, with millions of pounds wagered on everything from traditional choices, like Mary and Alice, to more modern options like Grace and Ivy. The public invested emotionally in these decisions, feeling a sense of connection to children they would never meet but who would one day represent them on the world stage. The pressure to choose correctly was immense. A name deemed too modern might be seen as a rejection of tradition and could alienate conservative supporters of the monarchy. A name too traditional might appear out of touch, a failure to recognize that the institution must evolve to remain relevant. A name that honored one side of the family while neglecting the other could spark accusations of favoritism or disrespect. Every angle had to be considered, every potential criticism anticipated and addressed. William spent hours in the royal archives, studying family trees and historical documents. He consulted with historians and constitutional experts, seeking their input on the appropriateness and significance of various options. The weight of history was palpable in these consultations. Names that seemed simple on the surface often carried complex associations when examined closely. A name might honor one important figure while inadvertently recalling another less admirable ancestor. Catherine approached the question from a different perspective, considering not just the historical weight, but the practical reality of the name. How would it sound in a playground? Would their daughter face unwanted attention or teasing because of it? Could it be shortened to a friendly nickname that she might prefer as she grew older? These parental concerns existed alongside the more formal considerations of royal protocol. She wanted her daughter to have a name that felt like hers, not just a collection of historical references that existed only to satisfy tradition. The couple also had to consider the international implications of their choice. The British monarchy no longer ruled over a vast empire, but it remained the symbolic head of the Commonwealth, a voluntary association of 56 nations spanning every continent. The name they chose would be heard and used by billions of people across vastly different cultures and contexts. It needed to be pronounceable in multiple languages, culturally sensitive, and capable of representing not just Britain but the diverse Commonwealth that the monarchy now served. There were names that Catherine had loved but William had concerns about, and the reverse was also true. There were suggestions from family members that had been politely acknowledged and quietly dismissed. King Charles had apparently favored certain traditional options, drawing on his extensive knowledge of royal history. Queen Camilla had advocated for something slightly more contemporary, perhaps reflecting her own experience of entering the royal family from outside and understanding the challenges of navigating tradition while maintaining authenticity. Prince Harry, despite the ongoing tensions within the family, had reportedly sent a private message, suggesting a name that held personal significance for both brothers. The gesture was noted, though whether the suggestion was seriously considered remained private. Princess Anne had characteristically stayed out of the debate entirely, though she had apparently remarked to a friend that whatever they chose would inevitably be criticized by someone. Her observation reflected the impossible position royal families often find themselves in, unable to please everyone regardless of their choices. The late Queen Elizabeth had established a precedent for this kind of careful consideration. When she named her children, she had balanced tradition with personal preference, royal duty with maternal instinct. She had understood that names mattered, that they shaped public perception and established expectations that would follow a child throughout their life. Catherine and William had studied her choices, learning from both her successes and the occasional missteps that even the most experienced royals could make. Historical precedents offered guidance but also revealed contradictions. Some names had been tremendously successful, helping to define an era and shape public perception of the monarchy. Others had proven problematic, carrying associations that complicated the lives of those who bore them. The challenge was identifying which historical patterns were worth following and which should be avoided. The discussion also involved considering how the name would age with their daughter. A name that seemed perfect for a baby might feel less appropriate for a teenager or a young adult. It needed to work across all stages of life, from childhood through to old age. It needed to sound right, whether being called out in a playground or announced at a formal state occasion. Beyond the immediate family, there were also institutional considerations. The palace's communications team needed to be able to work with the name effectively. It had to translate well across different forms of media, from formal press releases to social media posts. It needed to be spelled easily and consistently, avoiding potential confusion or embarrassment. Religious considerations also played a role, though perhaps less overtly than in previous generations. The monarch serves as supreme governor of the Church of England, and while that role has become more symbolic over time, it still carries certain expectations. Names with strong religious associations, or those that might be seen as rejecting that heritage, required careful consideration. The couple also thought about how the name would sit alongside those of their other children. There needed to be some sense of cohesion, a feeling that these names belonged together as a family unit. Too much variation might seem disjointed, while too much similarity could appear unimaginative. Finding the right balance was yet another factor in an already complex decision. As weeks of discussion continued, certain names began to emerge as stronger candidates than others. Each potential choice was tested in different contexts, imagined in different scenarios, examined from every possible angle. The process was exhaustive, sometimes exhausting, but William and Catherine understood its importance. This was not just about choosing a name they liked. It was about selecting one that would serve their daughter well throughout her life, whatever path that life might take. The official announcement came through channels that had been carefully orchestrated down to the minute. At precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the palace press office released a statement to the Press Association, following protocol that had been established generations earlier. The words were simple, elegant, and carefully chosen to convey both joy and appropriate seriousness. The Prince and Princess of Wales are delighted to announce that their daughter has been named Rose Alice Diana. 3 names, each carrying layers of meaning that would fuel discussion for weeks to come. The choice of Rose as the first name sent immediate ripples through royal circles and beyond. Unlike the previous children's names, which had clear precedents in recent royal history, Rose represented something different. It was a name that evoked the very symbol of England itself, the Tudor rose that had united warring factions and established a dynasty. It was also deeply personal, a tribute to Catherine's grandmother, Rose Asquith, a woman who had shaped Catherine's early years and instilled in her the values of family loyalty and quiet strength that had served her so well in royal life. But Rose carried other resonances too. The name connected the baby princess to Rose Gilman, one of the Queen Mother's closest friends, a woman who had provided unwavering support during the darkest days of the Second World War. It echoed connections to other family members named Rose, distant cousins whose grace and discretion had made them beloved figures within the family. The name managed to be both traditional and fresh, familiar yet distinctive. It avoided the pitfalls of being too common or too unusual, striking that delicate balance that the Wales family had sought throughout their deliberations. Rose was a name that could belong to anyone, yet when paired with the titles and circumstances of its bearer, it took on additional significance. Alice, the first middle name, carried equally profound meaning. Most obviously, it honored Princess Alice of Battenberg, Prince Philip's mother, a woman whose remarkable life had only recently received the recognition it deserved. Alice had been born deaf, yet she had learned to lip read in multiple languages and had become a formidable presence in European royal circles. During the Nazi occupation of Greece, she had hidden a Jewish family in her palace, risking her own life to save others. She had founded a nursing order and devoted her later years to charitable work. Her courage, compassion, and commitment to service represented exactly the values that William and Catherine hoped to instill in their children. But Alice also reached back further into British royal history. Princess Alice Maud Mary, Queen Victoria's third child, had been one of the most influential royals of her generation, using her position to advance causes she believed in and refusing to be confined by the limited expectations placed on women of her era. The name connected the new princess to this legacy of female royal agency and activism, suggesting that she might follow in the footsteps of ancestors who had pushed boundaries and challenged conventions. Diana, the second middle name, surprised no one yet still managed to be deeply moving. William had already honored his mother with Charlotte's middle name, but the inclusion of Diana in his second daughter's name underscored the enduring significance of the Princess of Wales in his life and legacy. 27 years after her death, Diana remained one of the most beloved and controversial figures in modern British history. Her name conjured images of glamour and tragedy, of revolutionary approaches to royal duty, and devastating personal struggles. By naming their daughter Rose Alice Diana, William and Catherine were ensuring that the next generation would carry forward Diana's memory and, they hoped, her commitment to using royal privilege to make a genuine difference in people's lives. The inclusion served multiple purposes. It honored William's mother, it acknowledged her lasting impact on the monarchy, and it signaled that her legacy would not be forgotten or diminished as time passed. The public reaction was instantaneous and overwhelming. Social media platforms exploded with commentary, analysis, and emotion. Rose began trending worldwide within minutes of the announcement. Florists reported a sudden surge in orders for roses of every variety. Baby name websites experienced crashes under the weight of traffic as expectant parents rushed to add Rose to their own shortlists. The name seemed to capture something that people had been wanting, a connection to tradition that still felt contemporary and relevant. Royal correspondents scrambled to provide context and analysis. Television networks interrupted regular programming to discuss the announcement. Experts were brought on to explain the historical significance of each name component. The analysis ranged from the measured to the enthusiastic, with some praising the choice as inspired, a perfect blend of honoring the past while looking toward the future. Others critiqued it as playing too safe, suggesting that William and Catherine had missed an opportunity to make a bolder statement about the monarchy's evolution. A few contrarians argued that any royal naming convention was inherently problematic, a perpetuation of hereditary privilege that had no place in modern democracy. But these critical voices were largely drowned out by the positive response from the majority of observers. Within the family, reactions were more private, but no less significant. King Charles released a brief statement expressing his delight at his granddaughter's name, noting that it honored multiple branches of the family tree in a way that spoke to the unity he had long championed. The statement was carefully worded, as all royal communications were, but those who knew Charles could detect genuine warmth in the phrasing. Queen Camilla was photographed leaving Clarence House with a broad smile, though she declined to comment to the waiting press. Her body language spoke volumes, suggesting approval and happiness at the family news. The relationship between Camilla and Catherine had always been respectful, and this moment seemed to reinforce that mutual regard. Prince Harry and Meghan sent a private message of congratulations, a rare moment of communication between the brothers whose relationship had been strained for years. The message remained confidential, but sources suggested it was warm and genuine, focusing on the joy of a new life rather than past disagreements. For many observers, this small gesture offered hope that family bonds might eventually be repaired, though others remained skeptical about any lasting reconciliation. Princess Anne, true to form, offered a characteristically measured assessment when asked about the name during a public engagement. "It's a perfectly sensible choice," she reportedly said, which from Anne constituted high praise indeed. Those familiar with the Princess Royal's direct manner understood that sensibleness was among the highest compliments she offered, reflecting her appreciation for practicality and thoughtfulness. Prince Edward and Sophie expressed their pleasure at the continuation of the Alice name within the family, given Sophie's own middle name and her close relationship with the late Prince Philip. Their statement highlighted the family connections and historical continuity that the name represented. Even some of the more distant relatives, those who typically avoided public comment on family matters, found themselves drawn into the conversation about what this name might signal about the monarchy's future direction. The days following the announcement saw continued discussion and analysis. Fashion magazines predicted that rose-themed clothing and accessories would surge in popularity. Historians wrote detailed pieces examining every historical Alice and Rose in the royal family tree. Psychologists offered opinions on how names shape identity and what this particular combination might mean for the young princess's development. Polls were conducted asking the public what they thought of the name. The results showed overwhelming approval, with most respondents indicating that they found the name both beautiful and appropriate. Some regional variations emerged, with Scottish respondents slightly less enthusiastic than those in England, perhaps reflecting ongoing debates about the Union and the class monarchy's role within it. International reaction was also largely positive. Commonwealth nations released statements welcoming the new princess and praising the name choice. European royal families sent private congratulations, maintaining the diplomatic protocols that governed relationships between royal houses. American media covered the story extensively, with particular attention to the Diana connection, given the enduring fascination with the late Princess of Wales in the United States. The announcement had achieved what William and Catherine hoped it would. It had honored the past while embracing the present. It had sparked conversation without generating controversy. It had reminded people why the monarchy still mattered to many, while acknowledging the changes necessary for its continued relevance. Rose Alice Diana was not just a name, it was a statement about continuity and change, tradition and progress, memory and hope. To understand why Rose Alice Diana represented such a carefully calibrated choice, one must look beyond the individual names to the broader context of the monarchy's current position. The British royal family found itself navigating complex waters, caught between competing pressures to modernize and maintain tradition, to be relatable yet maintain a certain mystique, to justify its continued existence in an age of increasing skepticism toward inherited privilege. Every decision, from the clothes they wore to the causes they championed, carried symbolic weight and potential for controversy. The choice to name their daughter Rose, a quintessentially English name with deep roots in national symbolism, could be read as a reassertion of the monarchy's connection to British identity at a time when that identity itself was being questioned and renegotiated. Brexit had fractured the country politically and emotionally. Scotland continued to debate independence. Northern Ireland's peace remained fragile. Wales was asserting its own distinct identity with increasing confidence. The United Kingdom was anything but united, and the monarchy's role as a unifying force had been challenged as never before. Rose, the flower that had symbolized the resolution of civil war and the birth of a new dynasty under Henry VII, represented hope for reconciliation and unity. Whether consciously or not, William and Catherine were invoking that symbolism, suggesting that their family and the institution they represented could still serve as a point of common identity for a fractured nation. It was a bold claim, perhaps even an audacious one, but it was also deeply traditional, reaching back to the very foundations of the Tudor monarchy that had established royal supremacy in England. The inclusion of Alice carried different but equally important messages. By honoring Prince Philip's mother, William was acknowledging his grandfather's profound influence on his life and on the monarchy itself. Philip had been the longest-serving consort in British history, and his death in 2021 had left a void that was still being felt throughout the family. But more than that, Alice represented qualities that the modern monarchy desperately needed to embody: courage in the face of adversity, compassion that translated into concrete action, humility despite privilege, and service that went beyond ceremonial duties. Princess Alice's story of hiding Jewish refugees during the Holocaust had only become widely known in recent years, thanks in part to dramatic portrayals in popular media. Her recognition as righteous among the nations by Yad Vashem had elevated her from a footnote in royal history to a figure of genuine moral authority. By invoking her name, William and Catherine were aligning their daughter, and by extension the entire royal family, with values that transcended nationality and religion: basic human decency, moral courage, and the willingness to risk everything for what was right. These were principles that resonated across cultural and political divides, offering a foundation for the monarchy's relevance that went beyond pageantry and tradition. Diana, of course, remained the most emotionally charged element of the name. 27 years after her death, William's mother continued to cast a long shadow over the royal family. Her legacy was complex and contested. To some, she represented everything good about modern royalty: warmth, accessibility, genuine compassion for the suffering, and a willingness to break outdated protocols. To others, she embodied the dangers of emotional decision-making, media manipulation, and the prioritization of personal feelings over institutional stability. William had spent his entire adult life trying to honor his mother while avoiding her mistakes. He had learned from watching her use media attention to advance her causes. But he had also witnessed how that same media had ultimately consumed her. He had absorbed her lessons about the power of human connection, the importance of showing up for people in their darkest moments, while also recognizing that the institution required certain boundaries and protocols to function effectively. By naming his daughter Rose Alice Diana, he was declaring that Diana's legacy would not be forgotten or diminished, that her contributions to modernizing the monarchy would be acknowledged and built upon. The name also served as a subtle rebuke to those who had sought to erase or minimize Diana's impact. For years after her death, the royal family had seemed almost reluctant to mention her name publicly. Charles had moved on with Camilla. The Queen had maintained a studied neutrality. Only William and Harry had consistently championed her memory, and Harry's departure from royal life had complicated even that tribute. Now, with Rose, Alice, Diana, William was ensuring that his mother's name would be spoken in royal circles for generations to come, carried by a princess who would represent the future of the monarchy. But names alone could not determine destiny. The true test would come in how Rose was raised, what values she absorbed, what role she would ultimately play in the royal family's evolution. Charlotte had already shown signs of the confidence and charisma that would serve her well in royal life. George, as future king, carried burdens that his siblings would never fully understand. Louis remained young enough that his personality was still emerging. Rose would grow up in their shadows, the fourth child who would never be expected to reign, but who might nevertheless play a crucial role in supporting and shaping the monarchy. Catherine understood this better than anyone. As a middle child herself, she knew what it meant to exist outside the spotlight, while still being shaped by family dynamics and expectations. She had watched her own siblings navigate their paths, finding ways to build meaningful lives without the burden of excessive attention or responsibility. She was determined that Rose would have similar opportunities, that being a princess would not become a prison from which there was no escape. William shared these concerns but approached them from a different angle. He had seen what happened when royal children were denied normal experiences, when they were so protected and isolated that they became incapable of relating to ordinary people. He had also witnessed the opposite extreme, when too much freedom led to scandals and embarrassments that damaged the monarchy's reputation. Finding the right balance would be the work of years, decades even, requiring constant adjustment and reassessment as Rose grew and the world around her continued to change. The christening of Princess Rose Alice Diana was held 6 weeks after her birth, following tradition that stretched back centuries. The Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace provided an intimate setting, its ancient walls having witnessed countless royal christenings, including those of her older siblings. The guest list was carefully curated, limited to close family and a small number of godparents chosen for their personal significance to William and Catherine, rather than their social status or political influence. The photographs released after the ceremony told their own story. Rose, resplendent in the Honiton lace christening gown that had been worn by generations of royal babies, appeared peaceful in her mother's arms. Catherine's smile radiated genuine happiness, a contentment that came from knowing her family was complete. William stood beside her, one hand resting gently on George's shoulder, the other holding Charlotte's hand, while Louis peered curiously at his new sister. It was an image of family unity that the palace hoped would define the Wales household in years to come. But even as the official photographs were released and commentators praised the event's dignity and grace, questions about Rose's future remained unanswered. What role would she play in the royal family's evolution? How would she navigate the peculiar challenges of being born into privilege while being expected to justify that privilege through service? What causes would she champion? What kind of person would she become? History offered some guidance, but no definitive answers. Princess Anne had forged a remarkable path as the Princess Royal, becoming arguably the hardest working member of the royal family while maintaining a fierce commitment to privacy and a no-nonsense approach to royal duty. Princess Margaret had chosen a different route, one that brought glamour and excitement but also scandal and sadness. Lady Louise Windsor and her brother James were showing yet another way forward, living relatively normal lives while still participating in royal events when called upon. Catherine and William had discussed these precedents at length. They knew they could not simply impose a predetermined path on their daughter. Rose would need to discover her own way, guided but not controlled, supported but not suffocated. The key was to instill the right values early, to teach her that privilege came with responsibility, that being a princess was about service rather than status. If they succeeded in that foundational teaching, the rest would follow naturally. The broader question of the monarchy's future hung over these discussions like an invisible presence. Public opinion remained divided on whether Britain needed a royal family at all. Polls showed majority support, particularly among older citizens, but younger generations were increasingly questioning the institution's relevance and value. The Platinum Jubilee celebrations for Queen Elizabeth had demonstrated that there was still genuine affection for the monarchy, but that affection was increasingly focused on specific individuals rather than the institution itself. William and Catherine understood that they represented the monarchy's best hope for continued public support. Their approval ratings consistently outpaced those of other senior royals. Their family appeared stable and loving in ways that resonated with ordinary people. Their children seemed grounded despite their extraordinary circumstances. They had successfully navigated scandals and controversies that might have destroyed less resilient couples. They had shown that it was possible to modernize royal practices without abandoning core traditions. Rose's birth and naming fit into this broader strategy of controlled evolution. By choosing a name that honored multiple aspects of royal history while still feeling contemporary, they were demonstrating that the monarchy could adapt without losing its essential identity. By welcoming a fourth child when many had assumed their family was complete, they were showing that royal families could make personal choices rather than simply following predetermined scripts. As the sun set over Windsor Castle on the evening of Rose's christening, William found himself standing alone in one of the castle's many rooms, cradling his sleeping daughter in his arms. The weight of history pressed down on him as it had throughout his life. He thought of all the royal children who had been christened in that same gown, all the hopes and fears their parents had harbored for them. Some had lived up to expectations, others had fallen short. Many had simply tried to live their lives with dignity despite impossible pressures. He whispered a promise to his daughter then, one that no one else would ever hear. He promised to protect her as much as any father could. He promised to teach her that her title was both a gift and a responsibility. He promised to show her that true nobility came from character rather than birth. He promised to love her unconditionally, whether she chose to embrace royal life or forge her own path away from it. Most importantly, he promised to let her be herself, whoever that self might turn out to be. Catherine joined him a moment later, slipping her hand into his. They stood, together in silence, Two people who had somehow found each other across the vast divide that separated her middle-class upbringing from his royal destiny. They had built something real together, something worth protecting and nurturing. Rose was their fourth child, but not their final statement. She was another chapter in an ongoing story, one that would continue long after they were gone. The name Rose Alice Diana would be spoken countless times in the years ahead. It would appear in history books and magazine articles. It would be analyzed by experts and debated by commentators. But none of that mattered as much as the simple fact that this was their daughter, a person whose worth had nothing to do with her title or her place in the line of succession. She was Rose, and that was enough.